So if you were to set the stage of construction technology, where are we at? And why is construction technology so important right now?
So I think the construction is just the next industry that is kind of going through digital transformation. And it's important to keep in mind that software can't do what people can do. It can make the job of people easier. It can do some of the lower level repetitive stuff that people do. It can remember things better than people, so it's a good place to deal with documents and things like that. So the reason why you're seeing this is, again, the amount of value that was unlocked when this happened in manufacturing and in advertising and, honestly, a number of different industries is huge. And this is such a big industry. The idea is you don't even have to convert that much into another form of value to create a lot, if that makes sense. So the idea is that if you've got, if 1% of the entire industry is spent on IT, which the Deloitte study implied that. I'll be honest with you, I'm not so sure about that number, but if it's even close, right, you're talking about $100 billion. Is that right? $10 billion, excuse me. Yeah, God, math on the fly. So you're talking about enormous amounts of money that are where you are now, and where it could grow to is 10x that. That's what's happened in other industries. So that's kind of a wonky way of saying we know that the industry is going to take some things that are paper-based and some things that are kind of person to person and make them into digital processes. You already mentioned some things that you're doing.
Yeah.
When that happens, it tends to mean that people are freed up to do more of certain things. It means you can look at things differently. A great example of that is, I know a number of contractors that bid a lot better than they used to. So their hit rates are higher. So their waste rates are lower. So think about how many times you bid for something and you blow all this time doing it and then you don't win. Or even worse, you win something and you don't make money on it. So that's what data and software are better at than your own memory, because you tend to remember things that are recent better and things that are awful better and things that are awesome better. So you're seeing some real wins when it comes to that. Still a long way to go, and we don't really know everything that's where it's all going to go. But there tends to be a lot of value created when you take paper and human processes and make some of them digital.
Do you think people are hesitant to try the new technology just because they don't know it, or what is it that why aren't people so eager to get into, say, takeoff softwares or project management apps? I've tried a few of them and I personally love it, but I know a lot of people that don't.
Yeah, I think it's a complex story. And I think the idea that people in construction are less likely to adopt technology, compared to who? Compared to Facebook, I gotta be honest with you. You go to someone at Facebook and say, I want you to switch the tool you use to draw. They're going to be pretty slow to do it too.
Yeah.
So I think there's this misconception that folks in construction are slower because they don't work at an office and they're not in front of a desk, that they're automatically slower to adopt new technology. I do think there's a few things. One is people want to get the job done well and quickly and safely. So when you're messing around with what they settled in, and this is how I do what I do, it isn't just being slow, and it isn't being, you got to be honest with the reality that people have a lot going on, and they're worried about the other people on the job. They're worried about things breaking, all the stuff that goes into really building something. To have to introduce a new variable there, it needs to be a hell of a lot better. Right. I think there's a generational thing for sure. I think that folks that grew up with iPhones and are going to be quicker and more comfortable
towards
with new
solutions
technology.
that can make construction companies more money and make people in the field more productive.
Better before someone's going to introduce a new variable, a new way to be risky. The other side is nobody in the world uses drones like construction does. So you could argue that if something really is a hit, people are going to be all over it. And I think drones do something you just can't do any other way. That's the other thing.
Unless you own a helicopter. I agree with you completely there.
Or really like trees.
I would really like a helicopter.
That's right.
No, you bring up a really good point. I think there is a very big misconception that, people in construction aren't tech savvy. I think the threshold for great products is just a lot higher for construction, because you are dealing with, and especially when you're talking about people in the field, like hanging off the side of buildings, it's a safety thing, right? They're not going to just like plug in data because you want them to on the job site so that you can collect information. It has to truly add value. And it's also like a safety concern. But, from what I've seen is, these people are tech savvy if it doesn't disrupt them in what they're doing on the job site, and if it adds value to them. It's just what I've seen, and they're more than happy to adopt products if it adds value and it's like it doesn't block them from doing their job. I was talking to someone the other day, and she brought up she was asking one of their tilers to take photos and document all this stuff, and his reply was, "I'm a tiler, not a fucking photographer." I mean, that's word for word, but then again, we have to realize that, we're either disrupting a process for what they're trying to build or adding value. So, I mean, the threshold is just a lot higher for products that need to exist in construction versus probably a lot of other industries.
I would also say, who's paying them to spend that 2 hours to noodle around and figure out how to make it work the way they need to?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a process somebody has to say that this is worth investing. And some companies do. Bigger companies have the ability to do that. Not everybody does. I mean, you're seeing in larger GCs for sure. And I think some of the larger trade contractors as well, an innovation team that has a learning component as well as going out and figuring out what tech's out there and trying to do pilots and all that. So they, one or two, and they have like almost a budget of how much they're going to onboard a year, like one thing a quarter or something like that.
Yeah.
Which can be a little tiring too, but at the same time, you get a little used to it. So it's really important to understand that somebody is paying for the effort to learn this thing. And it's either the individual, in which case they get less sleep because they certainly can't stop the job. Or it's the company who says, we're going to invest in you and we're going to invest in this. And you see a lot of both.
Yeah. One thing that I want to ask you there is, around budgets and the adoption of technology, who's paying them to learn it and everything. One thing that you talk a lot about is kind of like the misconception of what software and technologies are selling to these larger companies. Like there's a bigger misconception that construction is this massive industry. Yes, it is. But, the top people that have thousands of employees that are adopting this technology and can pay for it and have the budget to do so, it's much smaller pool than the vast majority of construction companies. I think, what was it in your construction technology? You stated like 85 or 90% of businesses in construction have less than 50 employees. Is that correct?
That's about right. Yeah.
Right.
That's about right. Yeah. I think it's 90% are under 50. And it gets like 98% is under 100 or something like that. I may have it wrong. It's been a little bit, but the point is that there are about 20,000 that are over 100 out of 730,000 roughly companies. There's about 20,000 of them that are over, I believe it's over 100 people.
I would have never suspected those numbers at all.
The funny thing is 20,000 is still a lot of companies. That's a lot of companies that have 100 people. It also means that the industry has a structure of a huge pool of freelancers. And the only reason they're called companies is because that's the way you organize an LLC to make sure
you have to structure it that way.
That's right. So I think, and so when we say there's 730 companies, okay, it's really more like 730,000. It's really more like maybe 60,000 companies, and
a bunch of individuals trying to do it legally. Yeah, that makes sense.
One thing that I want to bring up and talk to you about, Hugh, is this is one thing that both Matt and I care a lot about, but the labor shortage is the reason why Hammer exists, and Matt is very driven to bring in this next generation and everything. But I was watching your construction technology quarterly presentation on YouTube. I caught it after, and you made a really interesting point about the labor shortage. You basically summarized that there will always be a labor shortage because there just aren't enough people like Generation X coming in to replace boomers over the next 10 years that are retiring. What advancements are you seeing right now that will not only help with the labor shortage, but help people on the job site become more productive or just make their life and their work easier?
That's a huge question, and let's break it into some pieces here. The first one is deployment of resources. So I think we're getting better at scheduling crews and just scheduling people. Individually, people may feel like they're running from one thing to another, but when you look at companies in aggregate, often there's people that aren't working as much as they might. So just being able to deploy resources better is huge. That doesn't sound very technical, but that's what software can be good at. It's faster and it's easier to change, and you can communicate it quicker than paper. But also you can start to calculate and realize that Breck is better at certain things than Hugh is, right? So let's have Breck on this kind of job and Hugh on that kind of job. That stuff is coming. The really understanding who's better at what is a bit of a data thing, and you need to have worked with someone for a while, but you're going to start to see things like that. So that's one, is just deploying resources and making sure that people have both rest and have the ability and are used as are employed as much as they want to be. The interesting thing, there was a guy from Suffolk Construction. He was their first innovation officer, a guy named Chris Mayer. I talked to him a couple months ago. He said something really interesting. He said, look, a lot of technology right now is focused on supporting people putting work in place, but almost none of it is right there in someone's hand. And I think that's a big opportunity I wish we saw more of, where you're helping people actually put work in place, whether it's the tools themselves, adding some suggestions or intelligence. Maybe you don't have to keep setting something, you know what I mean? Like I know people have played around with some tools that will remember your settings, or you can have a few settings for different types of material and so on. All of that it doesn't in any way replace the innovation, creativity, and experience of a tradesperson. What it does is it means they don't have to mess around with some of the settings as much. You see what I mean? So I think you're going to find that things that add some productivity, they'll probably help around the edges, but aren't going to really replace a whole person. I think the work itself is going to have to get kind of reorganized a little bit. And by that, I mean, there isn't a lot of certainly software that's going to make up for a whole other person. So if we're short of people, and if you need 5 pipe fitters and you can only find 4 that are at the standard you need, there's no software out there. And I can't really imagine software that's going to be able to replace a whole person, right? You're going to have to reorganize how the work gets done. Either some of it gets done off site, so you don't need quite so many hands on deck. You can maybe dumb down some of what would be, I don't want to say dumb down, but kind of one of the things I even talked about in that quarterly is I think we're going to get good at separating out the stuff that needs a master, kind of, really high level, and stuff that is prep work that someone who's earlier on, they already do that, but I think it'll become more critical. And I think you'll organize things differently so that you can have less skilled labor involved.
I think sorry, go ahead. You're good.
No, I was on a rant.
I think when you're able to put people where they need to be, where they shine and where they do their best work, that you're able to do a lot more work than if you just have anyone and everyone on that task. Like we personally, we own a very small operation, but we have set person for doing this, set person for doing that. And everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. And we have it set up that way because they're good at what they're doing. It's not because that's what we want them to do, but that's where they shine. And that's how we're able to do as much as we possibly can, even while running a small operation. So I like that. Regarding tech though, the whole being able to remember things, we're only human. I forget all sorts of shit all the time. So being able to have really anything that could remind you of such, like I got a notification at 6 o'clock that we had a podcast at 6:30. And had I not got that notification, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So even stuff
Thanks for showing up, Matt.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm only here because of that notification. But like little stuff like that. I've missed meetings. I've shown up late to different things. I don't know how much that would help in the actual scope of whatever you're doing, say like framing for me. But in general, tech has helped me evolve our company in more ways than I ever freaking imagined. We haven't signed a contract in person in over a year now. Granted, we were late to the whole DocuSign game. Everything is done on a phone or on an iPad. And then project management. I keep track of everything on my phone. There's nothing that gets communicated via, we don't talk via email. We've got apps for this. We take care of everything like that. So I think I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do it with employees, like we were just talking about, but the more they can bring to anybody and everybody in the trades, the better off they'll be. Because we have youngins that they don't remember shit. And if they had an app on their phone, which everybody has a phone these days, we could make people a lot more valuable.
You're right. And I that speaks to what software is good at versus what humans are good at. Software can't solve real problems. It can do calculations. It can do math.
But it sure as hell can remember.
Well, that's right. That's right. And it'll remember, it'll never forget. And you just have to remember how narrow it is.
Yeah.
Right. Like expecting software. The problem we have, this is the issue with AI, is everybody compares AI to humans, which is the wrong way to think about it. AI is just better software. It's not an almost human. It's a better than software, if that makes sense. So anyone we used to play around with different speech recognition, that wasn't really AI. It's not important what it was. And it was clunky and crappy. As soon as they got deep learning in there, well, not as soon, it took a little while, but when they got deep learning working well, it's incredible. You can slur, you can speak with an accent, and it's, pretty good. So I think you're going to find that when you're asking software to do the things that the human mind isn't great at, which is remembering things, and especially kind of biases where we remember recent things and we remember exciting things, but that's not a trend. That's not a pattern. That's just stuff that happened. So that's another thing that's really good, is you can kind of step back and let the software describe for you what has happened based on a bunch of data points over time. You make better decisions that way.
Yeah, and I like the point that you bring up, being more resourceful with our labor pool, because again, you brought up, and it's well known now that the incoming generation is not going to be as big as the boomers, and so there's going to be a constant shortage there. So we need to be more resourceful with the labor pool and putting them in the right position so that we're effective. We're not just filling bodies on a job site.
You're not just putting somebody out there to do anything and everything. They're there for a reason. Now, we're definitely going to run into a shortage. I think it's coming sooner than people think.
Well, according to the census, we had a 300,000 person in terms of open jobs right before COVID, and that's when there was the largest 25 to 29 kind of cohort of people that there ever will be again.
Oh, wow.
So the thing is that, so we had the most people likely to enter the industry. If you assume that people don't enter when they're 18, but they wait, that's what I hear from most of the unions.
That's how most of it goes. They try something else and then they fall into it.
Yeah. And you're maybe at 18, you're maybe not quite mature enough to do some of the things that need to get done, like get up early. But
stay off your phone.
Yeah.
I could go on. We'll keep on rolling.
But so the reason I say ever is because countries are not having enough kids, period. Every developed country and most developing countries has stopped having enough kids. So the way you measure that is 2.1 kids per woman. You measure it per woman because women have the actual kids. And everybody's below 2.1, except for some crazy, weird little examples, like Israel has a thing that's not worth getting into. They're small enough that it doesn't matter anyway. Other than sub-Saharan Africa, the whole world is under 2.1. So it's not just us. And
I fell into a statistic. I have 2 and a dog. I mean,
That's
got to count for something.
And I love that dog. So anyway, that's why I say that efforts like what you're doing to recruit people and change the narrative that, look, this is a great job and you can have a 6-figure salary, in your early 20s or certainly your mid 20s, and you can, not have $250,000 in student debt, and all the reasons for going in. That's absolutely necessary, absolutely critical. It's not going to solve the problem all the way. It's just going to make it better. And it also means the people that choose to come in here will come in a little more enthusiastically and maybe be a little more willing to, kind of grind it a little bit in the beginning.
They know what they're after a bit more.
See, that's the part that I get excited about. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Matt. But that's the part that I get excited about for construction technology is, we have this stigma around construction, right? It's outdated, it's boring, it's graying of the industry. But I do think, One, the college debt thing is a massive problem in the industry. And it's like, hey, you can avoid that by going into the trades, and then look at all of these advancements. That's probably going to make your life and job a lot easier and a hell of a lot more attractive. But I think that's one of the most things that I'm enthusiastic about is the integration of software and technology, because it's going to change a lot of things, but it's also going to make it a lot more attractive to people coming in. Because, when my generation and people below me, they're growing up in the information era. They're growing up with the mobile devices. They want to use those things that empower them to.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And not only that, there's some things about building something that nothing else can do. Like, Matt, I think you spend a lot of time building homes. So you're building somebody's memories. You're building the place where they're going to live. And that's, I'm sure you're not thinking of that when you're pouring concrete and banging wood, as I understand is important to you. But at the end of the day, when you think about what you're doing with your life and how you spend your time, on a Sunday night or whatever, it's like, this isn't so bad. I've actually talked to a lot of folks that are, a little bit more on the superintendent side. And what are you proud of? What do you like about this job? And almost all of them say, at some point I've driven past the building I built and pointed it out to my kids. Like, that's cool.
Yeah,
it's hard to do that with it's hard to do that with a spreadsheet. It's hard to do that with a lot of other things, but you can say that 70-story building or that development of houses over there, I built that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, my dad still does it today.
Really?
Absolutely, man.
So
absolutely.
I have this one project I drive past. We commute down south to hang out with family all the time. I point to the same exact project, and my wife and kids hate it, and tell them, I don't know if you guys know this, but I built that place.
Yeah.
And it's every single time. It's probably twice a week, but I make a point of doing it. No, it's super satisfying. Doing what I do, considering I film a lot of the things, I really take pride in watching someone's house go up. But somebody that just goes to work, bangs nails, and does their thing, I don't think they think of it so much, because even our own employees, I've asked them, like, how rad do you think this is? Like, the homeowners here, they are so stoked on what they've got. And they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. But like, I don't think a lot of people think like that. So once you can understand, like, you're building someone's dream right now, this is everything they've ever wanted. It is so fulfilling, something that you can't get elsewhere.
Right.
I was recently reading a report. I believe Home Advisor did it, but they were trying to gauge
Home Advisor. How dare you reference Home Advisor right now?
We can cut that if we need to.
We'll leave it.
But
don't shop with Home Advisor.
So the point is, we're not doing a plug here.
No, we're not.
The point is,
clearly not.
They did a study. They did a study on job satisfaction in construction, and I was extremely surprised to see that 60% of people in the trades were very satisfied with their job.
You know how cool it is?
I'm not done yet. The other 20% is somewhat satisfied. That's 80% or over 80% of people in construction are satisfied with the work that they do, because they get to stand back each and every day and say, yeah, I built that. And that's probably one of the most fulfilling things. I know for a fact those bridge carpenters that we talk a lot about, Matt, those guys hanging off the bridges in San Diego, building the 905, they get to look back and say, like, hell yeah, I built that. Dude, I can't even compare with that. I've never been in commercial.
I haven't either.
But that's probably one hell of a thing to say.
I flew a roof in today, and as soon as that roof was on and everything was done, it was a stressful 3 hours of the crane, but we all got down. We were eating biscuits and gravy on the tailgate, and we sat there looking at this thing, and it was like 4 weeks ago, that was dirt. There was no foundation, nothing. It's insane to think about the fact that now there is this building that you could damn near live in that we built. I've never built a bridge though, but
I don't know if I'm going to try. I'd probably die. I'll keep it to those guys though. Hugh, one thing that I'd like you to cover is, again, you brought this up in your quarterly presentation, but I thought it was really interesting. Compressing the time it takes to become ready for the trades. I think this is super important, because we need to get people into the industry working quicker than ever, right? With the labor shortage. We not only need the labor, but we need them trained up and ready to go. What types of things are you seeing that are helping people get field ready quicker?
Seeing unions have tried everything. I know that the MCA and the UA in Chicago probably better than anywhere else, and they've done amazing things in terms of building whole mechanical rooms that you can tear up and weld in and all that stuff. Training people on things like Revit. They were pretty early at that, and they're really good at it now. They've got like, I don't even know how many instructors, but they're big enough that they like rank them almost. But also they've done everything like experiment with virtual reality. I think they do certain things there. The tech is getting better. And so I think there's a couple things. You need to separate out what you're teaching somebody. There's ideas that you can teach them when they don't have a tool in their hand. And then there's the fiddly reality of real stuff that you kind of need to have a tool in your hand for. You know what I mean? Like I remember a while ago, there was somebody who was talking about how augmented reality could kind of overlay the job and show you exactly what to do. And I remember mentioning to somebody, God, couldn't you just get a robot to do it? And they said, look, trying to get a robot to actually handle materials is so much harder than you think it is. Just to turn a screw just the right amount so it's snug, to hold something and move it the right way. And there's just way more judgment in this than we take for granted, because humans are incredibly good at that. What we find with I'll go off in robotics for 1 second. We'll come back to it again, I'm sure. But we find that we absolutely underestimate. Every time we try to build something that humans do, we realize how incredibly powerful the human brain is, especially the kind of visual side and the spatial understanding and all that. Trying to get a machine to do that we don't even know how to do it. It isn't a matter of more data, we just don't know how to do it at the scale that a human can do it, which is why we don't have cars driving, autonomous driving yet. It's a way harder problem than people thought it was. It's still going to come. It's still going to happen. But it's years behind what they thought it would be. So back to your question about kind of compressing the time. That was as much me saying that this needs to happen as me saying it is happening. The problem is some organized group has to do it. And unions are one way to do that. Not 90% of people in most trades aren't in a union. So then it's down to trade schools and other kind of, because an individual isn't going to write their own curriculum and isn't going to make sure that they did a good job. Someone's got to organize and do that. So I think that trade schools there's going to be more need for it. But I think also you can get a lot done in VR that helps you with understanding the space you're in and understanding safety and understanding some of those other things. But at the end of the day, actually putting work in place, you kind of got to be putting work in place, I think. We've just found this with too many things, even outside of construction, that you can show somebody what to do and you can really, really make it, again, we used to say with VR, I don't want someone learning where the buttons are when they have a live machine. I want them to know what they're doing and what they're, you know what I mean? Know where the stuff is. You can do that in VR and that's great. But at the end, this is true for manufacturing. I mean, I've done a fair amount with manufacturing. Somebody has to train someone on the machine, but they're expensive. So you want to do that as little as possible. The same thing's true with folks that are learning a trade. Is you can learn a lot about the space and about how to put things together and what goes where. Things that are really hard to learn on a piece of paper, and really improve somebody quickly. But again, I think at the end of the day, people have to have tools in their hands to be fully competent.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest pushback, right? Is the idea that trades can only learn with tools in the hand. I think that's definitely true to a certain extent, but like you alluded to, for the VR, helping them understand the space, not necessarily like trying to teach them how to swing a hammer per se.
And so it's kind of like they will often say there's stuff that you can tell and stuff that you can't tell, and the stuff about the job that you can tell, that you could write down, that you can teach without having a tool in your hand, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
Right. That's regulations. That's process. That's that's what tools work. There's a lot you can learn that you don't need a tool in your hand, and that's where either e-learning or virtual reality or something like that can help.
I was just about to chime in on that, because you could learn quite a bit. There is definitely things that you need the hands-on experience. You need the tools in your hand, but there is so much more. Like, think of plan reading, for instance. Like, I know you have to have the actual, here's what you're building, here's the detail in person. You can learn a lot about understanding the plans. This detail means this, a wall assembly, call outs. There's so many different things you could learn to be prepared on a job site before you even step foot on a job site. Obviously, you're not going to learn how to use a saw on YouTube, but you can definitely learn how to read a set of plans, maybe not to the extent where you're ready to run projects, but to the extent where you understand what call outs are and structural details and how to scale things. So I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that you have to have hands-on. You do for some things, but there's so much that can be learned online.
Yeah. And so an example of that, I for a while there, I was watching YouTube videos of industrial disasters, usually something chemical related, right? And these are really boring videos. They're made by the safety team, not boring, but they're, you know, they're recreated. But the value of watching these things is you realize how really mundane safety measures, why they do what they do, right? So like there was one I remember that was for a refinery, and they hadn't checked a valve in the period of time they were supposed to. Like, you know, it's supposed to be every 6 months, and they hadn't for like 3 years, and the valve rusted, and it allowed oxygen back in. So the, the whole thing about refineries is controlling where oxygen is, because most of what you're doing is flammable. So when you want to do stuff with it, you get it really hot with no oxygen around, and it breaks up into different things. So there's lots of stuff that would blow up if it had oxygen. So that, again, that one little thing that's they hadn't checked in time, and they didn't think it would get rusty, but it did for whatever reason. And oxygen got back into the wrong thing, and it killed 3 people. And the value of that is it's not a thing that you're going to even learn with a tool in your hands, is the sensitivity that you know, leaving a tool on the top of something,
Yeah.
right? Like logic will tell you not to do that, but until you hear a story of it falling on someone's head or something, it doesn't have the emotional impact that it might. So you can watch a bunch of videos and say, yeah, I get it, man. I understand. I can imagine how that's an issue. So I think, like, we both are kind of agreeing, there's a lot you could learn without needing an expensive resource like a senior person to show you, so that when you do have the senior person, they're teaching you hard stuff that only a human could teach you.
I talk to people about this quite a bit. I actually made a post about it recently. I get a lot of messages from people telling me they're ready to quit their job because their boss isn't showing them every single thing they want to learn. But they're also not trying to learn after 3:30 when they're off work. And in my opinion, if you want to invest in yourself and move further along in the trade, make more money, be more valuable, you have to become an asset. And by doing that, that means you might have to learn something on the side. Me personally, I've learned quite a bit scrolling through forums or YouTube, but a lot of these people want it on the job and on the job only. When in reality, you can watch a how to cut stairs video on YouTube and learn why you do this, why you do that, how to figure everything, and then take that to the job site. And maybe they show you a different variable that's a little tougher on the job. But you understand rise over run, you understand how to calc everything out, you're set. You only need to learn variables here and there. You can learn so much on the side. Like, it all depends on drive, in my opinion, though. So,
you know, if I can just also, one of the things that happens in construction is people often think that you know, certain issues are unique to construction. You know what I mean? As an industry, there is a little bit of a getting down on itself. And this, I don't know if this is one of them, but what I would point out is, it is just really, really common for people earlier in their careers to be pissed that their boss isn't teaching them more.
yeah,
It happens to also be a millennial thing that there's an expectation of learning and moving forward.
expecting
But
way too much.
that's a really, I'd rather it be that than expecting it to be all handed to you and you don't have to try very hard. So everyone's got an issue. But the point I'm making is, it's really common that people are annoyed that their boss isn't teaching them everything as fast as they want to learn it. The reality is, you gotta bang a lot of wood to understand how wood perform. I mean, making an example here, but you got to do the mundane stuff a ton, because you get intuition from that. You know, you get experience, and you start to have judgment. That, unfortunately, it means doing the same stuff over. And I'll tell you what, investment bankers that make $1 million a year, the first 2 years, they do the same. It's called internal rate of return. They do that over and over, hundreds of thousands of times.
It's for a damn good reason, though.
That's right. Because then they're able to, later on in their life, they're able to look at something and basically have a sense of deals. And in your case, you have a sense of what's going to work, or how long a thing is going to take, or what might be dangerous, and all that.
I mean, that's the whole point of the apprenticeship, right?
That's right. And
Ideally.
you are learning. Just because it's not stuff you could write down, you are learning. You're learning. You're just accumulating the experience that gives you judgment.
One thing that I wanted you to touch on, maybe you know better than I do, but you brought up kind of like compressing the time it takes to get into the industry. Are you saying like apprenticeships or learning paths, are those getting cut down to move people through the industry faster? Are you seeing anything
I don't
there?
think yet. No, I don't think yet. I think that there's a real concern about quality of people. So I think that's a tough one to really compress. It's going to have to happen. I don't think the pressure is felt enough that people are going to rethink what it means to be good enough. And I think there's going to come from a couple directions. I think that some of what gets designed will be potentially simpler. So the need for the same level of quality across everything might get either reduced or just reorganized a little bit. But the reality is, we're probably going to have a bunch of money pumped into the industry. I think it's going to be more horizontal and civil and although they're going to build 1 million houses. So, and we'll see where the build nets out, but the net is over the next couple of years, it's probably going to be the case that there will be a fair amount of money put into different pockets, everything but commercial, to be honest. Commercial's been so subsidized by low interest rates that they've had their day. So I think that there's just going to be a huge demand and people are going to have to find new ways around it. I don't know that it's going to be industry wide though. I think that's going to be up to companies. I think companies are going to have to figure out how to make do with what they can. They already are, right? Like they'll have more people on the job because the individual quality isn't what they wanted. So they just have more bodies, which is, isn't always the solution. I just think that's going to be up to companies to have to figure out. And maybe in 5 years or so, there'll be some new normal, or maybe there'll be some new solution. But I think the only way to deal with it is lots of companies feeling the pressure and innovating their way around it.
I want to ask one more thing, and Matt, I'm sure you'll chime in on this because we've talked about, the need for the skilled trades to be, I would say, if I'm saying this correctly, less skilled so that they can do more work. Like, are we going to see a ton of innovation around products that the skill level isn't as high where people can still perform on the job site?
So yeah, we are. And I think that's not the threat people think it is. I think you're going to need skilled people that understand how water flows and how wood performs and all this stuff. I do think that where that skill gets applied is going to shift a little bit. And by that, I mean, right now you've got trades, right, that are working in different kinds of Revit or this or that. They're doing things that the designers don't know how to do. You know what I mean? Like the location of building intelligence has absolutely moved towards the field. Not all of it. Of course, an architect still knows how to do what architects do. But the amount of innovation, new ideas, and new kind of thinking that's coming out of the trades is I think underappreciated. And I think that you're going to find there's some people are going to go into factories and be part of the design and the sub-assembly process. So if you think about how cars are made, like Toyota doesn't make most of the cars. Somebody makes sub-assemblies. And I think you're going to find some of the value, some of the things that the trades are good at will go into sub-assembly building instead of necessarily putting work into its final place. And I think there's a couple things about that. It could mean that you don't need to be as broad in your skill set. You know what I mean? Like you're working on a kind of sub-assembly for 5 years or something, and then you move on to something else.
You understand that very well.
That's right.
Okay,
Maybe, like you get that now. You get that now. You get people who know how to do water treatment and have no idea how to do a high rise. And so I think you'll just see that more. You get especially for hard stuff like new infrastructure.
We've talked about this quite a bit, and it's more or less we've dived into this quite a bit. Honed in on a single thing or knowing quite a bit. Jack of all trades or just killer at one. I think it has its benefits. I really do. I think that you're able to get a lot more work done when you know just one specific task. The thing I don't like about that is that it limits you so much depending on the trade you're in or what you do. Because in the case that goes away or you're no longer filled in that position, where do you go?
Yeah.
Because piecework, for instance, in the case you don't know that is, people will break down and build a new home, for instance, and there is somebody that does just the layout of the house. They go through, lay out all the plates. Then there's somebody that comes in and just bangs the walls. Walls get stood. Then there's somebody that comes and lays out and does the roof. All separate people, all paid separately.
Mhm.
But then you have people that come in and do everything like we do. But the people, like, I'm currently like mentoring a kid right now that just pieced walls forever. He only knows how to do walls. That's all he knows how to do. So we're going
He's
over.
awesome at it.
Yeah, he's great at it. He's great at it. But he's at a point right now where he has the opportunity to step up and take on more work, such as the layout or the roofs, so on and so forth. But he doesn't know how. And I that's the part I don't like. I'm having a hard time getting past that. Is I was always taught know as much as possible to where you always stay working. And I get being honed in and just killer at one thing, but diversity, being able to do multiple things, I feel is insanely valuable.
This is kind of economics, though, is that when you're under a big company, you can specialize. If you want to stay in smaller companies or you want to be an independent contractor, you got it. So that's part of the decision.
That makes sense.
And I got to be honest, I think one of the reasons that there are so many freelancers in this industry is because there is a bit of a Harley riding free spiritedness to people that choose to be a craftsman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you like figuring stuff out. You like the autonomy of being at some level solving problems on your own. Not everybody, but I think that as we're looking to address the skills gap, or sorry, the labor gap, one solution will probably be that some percentage of stuff gets built in a factory-like setting with bigger companies, and that's where narrowness.
That makes
and
sense.
it can be really narrow. I mean, it can be something. It can be something where that's what factory workers often are. Is they really understand the door. You know what I mean? And they've done 1,000,000 doors. It's a little bit more. Well-done factories are a little bit less robotic than you might think, though, because you're constantly working with groups and you're constantly doing quality circles to figure out how to do it better. But I believe it or not, the Japanese made one of the reasons they got so good at manufacturing is that they made people on the floor have autonomy and have the ability to solve problems instead of it being top down, which is how believe it or not, the Americans us in the 50s. We're very top down, and the Japanese said, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough money, we got to have everybody solving problems, and that became lean. So now that was their contribution to the world is lean.
Construction's been notorious for being one of the last industries to embrace new technology because it may disrupt the way people think. They don't like it screwing up their day. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's a ton of different reasons. But we also see the topic quite often that technology can be a big driver to attract the next generation workforce. For someone younger, how is technology going to make the industry more attractive? And maybe for those in the industry, how should they see themselves benefiting from using it in the coming years?
A couple of ways I'd break that up. One of them is the job is you're going to be able to imagine a bigger part of the job. So because you'll be able to see things through whatever software you're using for project management, for design and you'll be seeing design in a 3D way that is kind of cooler than a piece, than a printout. So I think it'll be an interesting, much more gamified almost, or game-like, in that you're going to be able to see what you're building as if it were a game scene, and you'll be able to walk around it in VR or some version of AR. So I think that you're going to be surrounded by technology in a way that is just not true in almost anywhere else.
Okay.
That's part of it. How it's going to help people, that's one way. Is there'll be some cool factor to it.
Fun in a sense.
That's right. But the other thing is that and this relates to what people should do. And if there were a thing someone should learn, it's data. So understanding what data is and not being panicked that it means I have to do a lot of math, because you don't. That's exactly what the computer does, or what the software does. What you do have to do is appreciate that if the software is going to do its thing with data, you have to have apples and apples. So when you're entering data or you're doing whatever, you have to know that the thing is going to add it up and multiply, do math on it. To do that, you can't have apples, oranges, and pears. So you do have to respect that you're putting things in. There's a reason to put it in the same way each time across groups. And man, that is hard. Getting folks to put data in the same way is hard. And I think it's for two reasons. One is people didn't know why. The other one is the data entry is so badly designed most of the time. You're forgetting that someone's in the hot sun, or they're tired, or they got gloves on, or, they've got hands the size of sausages or fingers the size, you know what I mean? Like it's a lot of times people, their hands get calloused up and all that. So I think that's getting better. Definitely on both ends. People are understanding data because they're seeing the output, they're seeing dashboards, they're seeing reports, whatever. And on the other side is, software is not as bad as it was for a couple of years. There it was pretty tin-eared, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. I like the technology part about making it more attractive, because even myself, I find that being able to pull up like a 3D rendering and look at how a project is supposed to be, or different details, that makes it a lot more entertaining. And I grew up playing video games, so the concept of like building something on a game, and then, I mean, we're technically doing the same thing except for with real wood in person. It makes it a little bit more involved as well, being able to flip through things on an iPad and design things if you need to. We've used multiple different programs for that, to change details and draw things up on an iPad rather than just like sketching it out on a napkin. It's a little bit more involved, and I agree with you that a lot of the younger generation, like my 3-year-old can work an iPhone. It's insane. But like, you grow up doing that type of thing, you get to do it in construction and build stuff as well. Like, that's a win-win.
That's right. And we don't know where they're going to take it. I mean, like, the technology keeps moving forward. There's going to be a couple of jumps. It looks like Apple may actually be releasing their glasses faster than everyone thought, or at least some version of them. That'll be pretty insane, because they work in sunlight. At least the thing I saw is just the last couple of days, that they're looking to announce something, and it looks like they've made it so it works in sunlight, which no other AR really does. That's cool. And it's glasses, so you can wear it with a hard hat, unlike the HoloLens until Trimble did what Trimble did, and that's $5,000. So it's not
holy smokes. Yeah, that's not just anyone's buying it.
No, you gotta really love you some AR. And it turns out to be big construction, big GCs will sometimes invest in it. A couple of them have really kind of leaned into it. But no, so this we'll see. But whether it's now in the next couple of years or a little beyond that, the ability to have data overlaid into the world with you is coming, and it's coming pretty fast. And you can do cool stuff with your phone now, but it means you got to hold your phone up.
Yeah.
So that's coming quickly, and what that'll mean is that all the things we said before that people aren't good at, the computer will be right there, the software will be right there to remind you of. You know what I mean? And it can't do the things humans can do. Let's keep saying that over. It doesn't know context. It doesn't know that Breck is really good at this, or Breck had a bad night last night, so he's going to be slower, or Breck is trying to impress the boss, so he's really rare. It won't have any context that a human can have. What it can do is say, this is the next thing on the schedule, or you've got a meeting in 5 minutes, so wrap up what you're doing.
Yeah.
Simple little things that a human assistant might do. That makes a big difference, though. It means that the whole job site runs a little smoother. It means that things get missed a little bit less. Inspections get run maybe a little bit faster and easier. God help us.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, Hugh. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff coming for construction technology and just the industry in general. I mean, we have to move forward. We have to make people more productive. We have to support the labor shortage and everything. But I think it's definitely going to help. Like, collaboration's there, making people more productive in the field. I mean, it's going to impact everything. But like you said, not necessarily robots taking over the world yet.